The old pickup truck sputtered to a halt beside the stranded woman, its faded blue paint peeling under the harsh summer sun. Noah Harrington stepped out, his weathered hands gripping a tow rope as he approached. "Looks like you could use some help," he said with a tired smile. The woman tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, eyes assessing him carefully. "I appreciate it. I'm Alexandra." "Noah," he replied simply, not noticing how she studied the worn edges of his truck with unusual interest. He couldn't have known that the broken-down Mercedes she'd been driving was just one of dozens she owned, or that the phone in her designer handbag could summon a fleet of luxury vehicles with a single call. As they climbed into his truck together, her shoulder brushing against his, neither realized this chance encounter would transform both their lives forever. He saw only a beautiful stranger needing help, not the heiress to Blackwell Motors who'd been searching for someone real in a world built on facades. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Now, let's dive back into this unexpected story of fate, fortune, and finding connection in the most unlikely places. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Noah Harrington's farmland as he guided his ancient Ford pickup down the uneven dirt road. His day had already stretched 2 long 14 hours of fighting, an irrigation system that seemed determined to fail, of coaxing reluctant machinery to life for just one more season. At 34, the creases around his eyes had deepened, etched by years of worry and unrelenting work. He'd inherited the 500-acre farm from his father 8 years ago, along with mounting debts and equipment that was outdated even then. Each season since had been a desperate gamble against forces he couldn't control: unpredictable weather, fluctuating crop prices, and the crushing weight of loans that never seemed to diminish regardless of how many 18-hour days he worked. The truck's radio had long since died, leaving Noah alone with his thoughts as he drove. Lately, those thoughts had grown increasingly bleak. 3 banks had already rejected his loan applications for the new irrigation system the farm desperately needed. Without it, he might not survive another growing season. The farm that had been in his family for 4 generations might be lost on his watch. He rounded a bend in the road and squinted against the setting sun. A sleek black Mercedes was pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking accusingly in the golden light. Beside it stood a woman, her posture straight and confident despite her obvious predicament. She was speaking intently into her phone, gesturing with her free hand. Noah's first instinct was to drive past. He was bone-tired, hungry, and had his own problems to solve. But something, perhaps his father's voice in his head, reminding him about country hospitality, or maybe just the unusual sight of such a luxury vehicle on this remote stretch of road, made him slow down. He pulled over 20 feet ahead of the stranded car and watched in his rearview mirror as the woman lowered her phone, her expression shifting from frustration to cautious relief. Noah stepped out of his truck, the familiar creak of the door a comforting sound in the quiet evening. "Car trouble?" he called, walking back toward her. Up close, the woman was striking in a way that seemed almost out of place against the backdrop of dusty farmland and open sky. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, but her clothes casual as they appeared at first glance were clearly expensive. Designer jeans that had never seen a day of actual work, and a white blouse that somehow remained pristine despite the heat and dust. "Yes," she said, slipping her phone into a handbag that probably cost more than Noah's monthly mortgage payment. "It just died while I was driving. No warning, nothing. And apparently, the nearest towing service is 2 hours away." Noah nodded, unsurprised. "That's Riverdale for you. Not exactly a metropolitan hub." He gestured toward her car. "Mind if I take a look? I'm no mechanic, but I've had to learn a few things keeping my equipment running." The woman hesitated for just a second before nodding. "Please, I'm Alexandra, by the way, Alexandra Reeves." She extended her hand, and Noah noticed her nails were short and unpainted, practical, not what he'd expected. "Noah Harrington," he replied, taking her hand briefly. Her grip was firmer than he'd anticipated. "The farm about 2 miles up the road is mine." Alexandra's eyes brightened with interest. "A farmer? What do you grow?" "Bit of everything. Corn, soybeans, some wheat." Noah moved toward her car. Keys? She handed them over, watching as he slid into the driver's seat. The interior of the car smelled like expensive leather and some subtle perfume that reminded him of the wildflowers that grew along his property line. He turned the key and was met with a clicking sound that told him everything he needed to know. "Alternator's gone," he said, climbing back out. "That's not something I can fix here. You'll need a tow and a garage." Alexandra sighed, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "And as I've just learned, that's not happening tonight." Noah glanced at his watch, then at the darkening sky. He couldn't leave her here alone as night fell. The temperature would drop significantly, and the next passing car might not come until morning. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Maplewood Inn. I have a reservation." She named the only hotel in Riverdale, a modest place that mostly served as a stopover for salespeople and the occasional lost tourist. Noah calculated the distance. "That's about 15 miles from here. I can give you a lift if you'd like. We can call about your car from town." Alexandra studied him for a moment, clearly weighing her options. Noah knew what she saw: a tall, sun-weathered man in work-stained clothes, offering a ride in a truck that had seen 2 decades of hard use. He wouldn't have blamed her for declining. "That's very kind of you," she said finally. "Let me grab my bag." Noah helped her transfer a surprisingly modest suitcase from her car to his truck. As she locked her Mercedes, he couldn't help noticing how she ran her hand almost affectionately along its sleek hood. "Nice car," he commented as they climbed into his pickup. The contrast between her vehicle and his couldn't have been more stark. His dashboard was dust-covered, the seats patched with duct tape in several places. "Sorry about the state of this old thing. It's not much to look at, but it gets me where I need to go." Alexandra settled into the passenger seat, seemingly unbothered by its worn condition. "It has character," she said, running her fingers lightly over the cracked dashboard. "How long have you had it? This truck?" Noah turned the key, and the engine coughed to life with its familiar rattle. "It was my dad's. He bought it used when I was 10, so that's 24 years now. Honestly, I'm surprised it's still running." As they pulled away, Noah saw Alexandra take one last look at her abandoned Mercedes. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read, not the expected frustration or worry, but something closer to curiosity. "So what brings you to Riverdale?" Noah asked as they bumped along the country road. "We don't get many visitors, especially not in—" He hesitated, not wanting to sound presumptuous. "Inexpensive cars?" Alexandra finished with a small smile. "I'm here for work, actually, a research trip of sorts." "Research? Are you a scientist or something?" She laughed, the sound surprisingly warm in the confined space of the truck cab. "Or something. I work for an automotive company. I'm here to look at some properties and get a feel for the area." Noah's interest piqued. "An automotive company is looking at Riverdale? That's unexpected." "We're considering several rural locations for a new project," she explained, her eyes scanning the passing landscape. The setting sun bathed the rolling farmland in golden light, transforming the ordinary fields into something almost magical. "This area has potential." Noah couldn't imagine what potential his struggling hometown held for a car company, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he found himself talking about the land they passed, pointing out which farms belonged to whom, which fields were lying fallow this season, which stretches of road flooded in heavy rain. Alexandra listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about crop rotation and water management that surprised him. As they approached town, the conversation shifted. "The Maple Woods restaurant closed down last year," Noah said. "But there's a decent diner across the street that serves dinner until 9. Are you recommending it?" Alexandra asked. Noah glanced over, trying to gauge if she was teasing him or genuinely asking. Her expression was open, curious. "I am. Their meatloaf is the best in the county. Not that there's much competition." She smiled. "Then perhaps I'll try it." The truck rattled over a pothole, and Noah winced. "Sorry about that. Roads around here don't get much attention from the county." "It's fine. Actually, I find this refreshing." Alexandra gazed out the window as the first buildings of Riverdale came into view. the gas station, the small post office, the hardware store with its faded awning. I spend too much time in places where everything is perfect, and nothing is real. The statement hung in the air between them, unexpectedly revealing. Noah wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply nodded and drove on. The Maplewood Inn appeared ahead, a two-story building with a quaint, if somewhat tired, facade. Noah pulled into the small parking lot and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. "Thank you for the ride," Alexandra said, reaching for her bag. "I really appreciate it." "It's no problem," Noah hesitated, then added, "I could pick you up tomorrow morning, take you back to your car, help arrange for a tow." Alexandra paused, her hand on the door handle. "You've already gone out of your way?" "It's no trouble," Noah insisted, surprised at his own eagerness to help. "Really? I need to head into town anyway for supplies." This wasn't strictly true, but he found himself unwilling to simply drop her off and never see her again. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "If you're sure, that would be helpful." "Thank you." Noah watched as she checked in, her slender figure disappearing through the hotel's front door. Only after she was gone did he realize he'd forgotten to ask what time to pick her up. He sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, debating whether to go in after her, before deciding that would seem too eager or worse, creepy. Tomorrow morning he'd simply come by around 8. On the drive home, his tired mind wandered to Alexandra Reeves. There was something about her that didn't quite add up. Her clothes and car screamed wealth, but she'd seemed genuinely interested in his humble truck and the struggling farms they passed. She'd mentioned working for an automotive company, but hadn't specified which one or what she did there. And why would any car company be looking at properties in Riverdale? By the time Noah reached his farmhouse, a two-story structure that, like his truck, had seen better days, he had convinced himself he was overthinking things. Alexandra was just a stranded traveler he'd helped out. Tomorrow he'd drive her back to her car, make sure she got the help she needed. And that would be the end of it. Yet as he heated up leftover stew for dinner, he found himself wondering if she'd tried the meatloaf at the diner, and what she'd thought of it. Alexandra Reeves sat on the edge of the surprisingly comfortable bed in her hotel room, phone pressed to her ear. The room was simple, but clean floral wallpaper, sturdy oak furniture, a landscape painting of local farmland above the bed. "The car broke down," she said into the phone. "Yes, I know the irony isn't lost on me either, James." On the other end of the line, her assistant sounded concerned. "Should I send someone? I can have a car there by morning." Alexandra found herself shaking her head, though James couldn't see her. "No, that won't be necessary. A local farmer gave me a ride into town. He's offered to help me sort things out tomorrow." "A farmer?" James's tone held a note of amusement. "How quaint." "Don't be condescending," Alexandra chided, but there was no real sharpness in her voice. James had been with her for 5 years and had earned the right to gentle teasing. He was kind enough to stop when others didn't. And his truck. Ow. She paused, remembering the worn but meticulously maintained vehicle. His truck was interesting. "Interesting?" James repeated. "That's not a word I've heard you use about a vehicle in a long time." Alexandra smiled, knowing he was right. As the granddaughter of William Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Motors, and the daughter of its former CEO, she had grown up surrounded by the finest automobiles in the world. By 16, she could name every make and model on the road and discuss their engineering specifications in detail. By 25, she'd helped design 3 of Blackwell's most successful luxury models. But somewhere along the way, cars had stopped being fascinating machines and had become merely products, sleek, perfect, predictable products, designed to appeal to a market segment rather than to inspire passion. It was a '98 Ford F-150, she said. Blue. Original paint faded almost to gray in places. The engine had a distinct rhythm to it, something in the timing belt, I think. But it ran, and he clearly maintains it meticulously despite its age. "You're thinking about the Heartland project," James stated rather than asked. Alexandra sighed. "I am. The board is pushing for another luxury line, but I still think there's an untapped market for reliable, repairable vehicles for working people. People like... She stopped herself before saying Noah's name. People like your farmer? James finished for her, and she could hear the smile in his voice. He's not my farmer, Alexandra protested mildly. But yes, people like him. Did you know he's been keeping that truck running for 24 years? When was the last time we designed a vehicle intended to last that long? James was quiet for a moment. The board will still need convincing. The profit margins on luxury vehicles are excellent, I know, Alexandra cut in. But sustainability matters too. Not just environmental sustainability, but economic sustainability for the people who buy our products. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small town's main street. A few people strolled along the sidewalk, stopping to chat with neighbors. Anyway, that's a discussion for when I return. For now, I'll continue my research trip as planned. Broken down car and all. Should I at least arrange for a rental to be delivered tomorrow? Alexandra thought about Noah's offer to help her the next day. No, let's wait and see what happens with my car first. I'll let you know if I need anything. After ending the call, Alexandra decided to take Noah's dinner recommendation. She freshened up quickly and walked across the street to the diner, where she ordered the meatloaf special. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner, raised her eyebrows slightly when Alexandra mentioned Noah had recommended it. You know Noah Harrington? The waitress asked as she poured water into Alexandra's glass. Not really, Alexandra admitted. My car broke down, and he gave me a ride into town. The waitress Doris, according to her name tag, nodded approvingly. That sounds like Noah. Salt of the earth, that one. Been having a rough go of it since his father passed and left him the farm, but you'll never hear him complain. Alexandra found herself curious. Rough go? The farm's not doing well? Doris glanced around the half-empty diner, then leaned in slightly. Between you and me, most of the farms around here are struggling. Big agricultural companies, buying up land, changing weather patterns, equipment costs rising while crop prices stay flat. But Noah's had it worse than most. Bad storm damaged his irrigation system 2 years back, and he's been patching it together ever since. Needs a full replacement, from what I hear. That sounds expensive, Alexandra commented. Sure is. Probably looking at $70,000–$80,000 for what he needs. And the banks aren't exactly rushing to lend to small farmers these days. Doris straightened up. Anyway, you enjoy that meatloaf. I'll check on you in a bit. As Alexandra ate her surprisingly delicious dinner, her mind kept returning to Noah. She thought about his weathered hands on the steering wheel, the quiet pride in his voice when he spoke about his land, the genuine kindness he'd shown a complete stranger. And she thought about his truck nearly a quarter-century old and still running, a testament to care and resourcefulness. By the time she returned to her hotel room, a plan was beginning to form in her mind. She made another call, this one to her company's research and development department, and spent an hour discussing technical specifications for engines designed for longevity and ease of repair. When she finally lay down to sleep, Alexandra found herself looking forward to seeing Noah Harrington again in the morning, and not just because of what he might teach her about the needs of rural vehicle owners. Noah woke before his 5 a.m. alarm, his body conditioned by years of pre-dawn starts. The familiar aches in his shoulders and back greeted him as he swung his legs over the side of the bed. The house was quiet around him, empty in a way that sometimes felt peaceful and other times felt lonely. This morning, it felt like neither. Instead, there was an unusual sense of anticipation about the day ahead. He followed his normal routine, coffee brewing while he checked the weather forecast, a quick breakfast of toast and eggs eaten standing at the kitchen counter, a review of the day's tasks in the notebook he kept by the phone. But his thoughts kept drifting to Alexandra Reeves and their planned meeting. By 7:30, Noah had already checked the irrigation line in the south field, fed the small herd of cattle he kept as a secondary income source, and changed into his least worn pair of jeans and a faded but clean craft plaid shirt. He caught himself splashing on a bit of the aftershave his sister had given him last Christmas unused, until now Anne shook his head at his own behavior. She's just passing through, he reminded himself aloud as he climbed into his truck. And she's clearly from a different world. The drive to town was quick. the morning sun already warming the late summer air. Noah pulled into the Maplewood Inn's parking lot at 5 minutes to 8, then debated whether to go inside or wait in his truck. Before he could decide, the front door of the inn opened, and Alexandra stepped out. She looked different this morning, still put together, but more casual in dark jeans, a simple green t-shirt, and leather ankle boots. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore sunglasses against the bright morning light. She spotted his truck immediately and walked toward it with a smile that made Noah's heart beat a little faster. "Good morning," she said as she climbed into the passenger seat. "You're right on time." "Morning," Noah replied, suddenly feeling awkward. "Sleep okay?" "Surprisingly well." She settled into the seat, seeming perfectly at ease in his old truck. "And the meatloaf was excellent. You have good taste." Noah felt absurdly pleased by this small compliment. "Glad you liked it. I called Mike's garage this morning. They can tow your car in, but Mike said it might be a few days before he can get an alternator for a Mercedes. Not exactly a common car around here." Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. "I figured as much. I was actually wondering." She paused, then continued in a casual tone that somehow didn't sound quite natural. "I still need to look at some properties in the area. Would you be willing to show me around? I'd compensate you for your time, of course." Noah blinked in surprise. "Show you around? I mean, I could, but there's not much to see in Riverdale. I'm interested in the surrounding farmland, actually. You obviously know the area well, and She hesitated. "I'd value your perspective." Noah should have said no. He had a farm to run, tasks that couldn't wait, responsibilities that didn't take days off. But the prospect of spending more time with this intriguing woman was too tempting to resist. "I guess I could move some things around," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "But you don't need to pay me. Consider it Riverdale hospitality." Alexandra smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Thank you. That's very kind." They drove to her stranded Mercedes first, where Noah helped her retrieve a few more items before they called the towing service. As they waited for the tow truck to arrive, Alexandra wandered a short distance away, phone to her ear, having what appeared to be an intense conversation. Noah couldn't hear what she was saying, but her free hand gestured emphatically as she spoke. The tow truck arrived, driven by Pete Wilson, a man Noah had known since childhood. Pete raised his eyebrows at the Mercedes, then at Alexandra, and finally gave Noah a questioning look that Noah pretended not to notice. Once the car was secured, and Pete had departed with promises to see what Mike can do, Alexandra rejoined Noah. "So," he said, "where would you like to start this tour?" Alexandra considered for a moment. "Actually, I'd be interested in seeing your farm, if that's not too intrusive." Noah hesitated. His farm was hardly a showpiece. The equipment was old, the buildings in need of repair, the fields showing signs of the irrigation problems he'd been battling. But Alexandra seemed genuinely interested, and he found himself nodding. "Sure, we can start there. Just don't expect anything fancy." The drive back to Noah's farm was filled with surprisingly easy conversation. Alexandra asked thoughtful questions about the local agricultural economy, the challenges farmers faced, and how technology had changed farming practices over the years. Noah found himself explaining concepts he normally took for granted, seeing his world through her fresh perspective. "So, these larger agricultural companies," Alexandra said as they turned onto the dirt road leading to Noah's property, "they're buying up small farms when owners can't make ends meet?" Noah nodded grimly. "Happening all over. The Jensen place down the road sold last year. The Wilsons are talking about selling too. Their daughter's in college, no interest in coming back to farm, and they're getting too old to manage on their own." And you?" Alexandra asked, her tone careful. "Are you managing?" Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm doing all right." The lie tasted bitter, but pride kept him from admitting just how precarious his situation had become. If Alexandra noticed his discomfort, she didn't show it. Instead, she looked out at his fields as they came into view. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "All of it." And for a moment, seeing it through her eyes, Noah was reminded of why he fought so hard to keep this land. It was beautiful. the golden fields stretching toward the horizon, the cluster of buildings that made up the heart of the farm, the oak trees his great-grandfather had planted lining the driveway to the house. He parked in front of the farmhouse, a 2-story white clapboard structure with a wraparound porch. The paint was peeling in places, and one of the porch steps needed replacing, but it was still a handsome house that had sheltered generations of Harringtons. "This is home," Noah said simply as they got out of the truck. Alexandra stood for a moment, taking it all in. "It has history," she said. "You can feel it." 4 generations, Noah confirmed. "My great-grandfather built it in 1923. We've added on over the years, modernized where we could afford to, but the bones are the same." He led her on a tour of the property, the barn, where he kept his equipment, the grain silos, the cattle pasture beyond the main fields. Alexandra asked to see the irrigation system he'd mentioned, and Noah showed her the patched-together network of pipes and pumps that he worried about constantly. "It's mostly functional," he explained, crouching down to show her a junction that had been leaking recently. "But it's inefficient, wastes water, and parts of it fail every few weeks. I spend more time fixing it than I should." Alexandra knelt beside him, examining the system with surprising technical interest. "You need a complete overhaul," she said, not a question but a statement. "Yeah," Noah admitted. "But that costs money I don't have right now." Alexandra nodded, standing and brushing dust from her jeans. "And the truck? You maintain that yourself too?" "Most of it. Some things I take to Mike's, but basic maintenance, minor repairs I handle those." They walked back toward the house, and Noah felt a sudden self-consciousness about what Alexandra must see a struggling farmer, barely keeping his head above water. Living in a house that needed work, driving a truck held together with determination and duct tape. "I should probably get back to work," he said, the words coming out more abruptly than he'd intended. "Where did you want to see next?" "The Wilson property is about 10 minutes from here if you're interested in land that might be for sale soon." Alexandra studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Actually, would you mind if we took a break? I've been on my feet all morning, and I'd love a glass of water if that's okay." Noah felt immediately remorseful for his brusqueness. "Of course! Sorry, I didn't think. Please, come inside." He led her up the porch steps, automatically avoiding the one that needed replacing, and into the farmhouse. The interior was cool and dim after the bright sunlight outside. Noah had never thought much about how his home might appear to others, but now he saw it through Alexandra's eyes. The worn but clean furniture, the simple kitchen with its dated appliances, the family photos lining the hallway. "Water? Or I could make coffee," he offered. "Water is perfect, thank you." While Noah filled 2 glasses from the tap, Alexandra wandered into the living room. When he joined her, she was examining a framed photo on the mantel. Noah as a teenager, standing proudly beside his father next to that same blue truck, both of them smiling widely. "Your father?" she asked, accepting the glass he offered. Noah nodded, a familiar ache in his chest at the sight of his dad's face. "Yeah, that was the day he bought the truck. I was 10. Thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen." Alexandra smiled, studying the image. "You look like him." "People used to say that," Noah agreed, taking a sip of his water to hide the emotion that always surfaced when he talked about his father. "He taught me everything I know about farming. And about vehicles. He was the one who insisted I learn how to maintain the truck myself. Said a man should understand the tools he depends on." "He sounds wise," Alexandra said softly. They sat on the worn sofa, and Noah found himself telling her about his father, how he'd modernized the farm in the 90s, how he'd weathered the drought of '08 when other farms failed, how he'd fought the cancer that eventually took his life for 3 years longer than the doctors had predicted. "He left me the farm, the truck, and a stack of medical bills," Noah concluded. "I paid off the bills eventually, but the farm never really recovered from those years when he was sick and couldn't work it properly." Alexandra listened intently, asking occasional questions, but mostly just letting him talk. It had been a long time since Noah had spoken about his father at such length, and never to someone who hadn't known him. It felt strangely liberating. Their conversation drifted to other topics: Noah's brief attempt at college before returning to the farm, Alexandra's work in the automotive, Industry. Product development, she said vaguely when he asked for specifics. Their shared love of thunderstorms and dislike of crowded cities. It was past noon when Noah finally glanced at his watch and realized how much time had passed. I'm keeping you from your property tour, he said apologetically. Alexandra shook her head. Not at all. This has been She seemed to search for the right word. Illuminating. They spent the rest of the afternoon visiting several properties in the area that Alexandra expressed interest in. At each location, she took photos with her phone and made notes in a small leather-bound notebook. She asked Noah about water access, soil quality, and proximity to transportation routes, questions that suggested a more practical purpose than he'd initially assumed. Are you really considering building a car factory in Riverdale? He asked as they drove back toward town as the sun began to set. Alexandra looked startled, then laughed. No, not exactly. It's a bit more complicated than that. She hesitated, then added, but I am serious about the research. This trip has been very valuable. They stopped for dinner at the diner again, where Doris gave Noah a knowing look that he studiously ignored. The conversation flowed easily over meatloaf and apple pie, and Noah found himself reluctant for the evening to end. When he finally dropped Alexandra at her hotel, she paused before getting out of the truck. Thank you for today. For everything. My pleasure, Noah said, meaning it more than he would have thought possible 24 hours earlier. I'd like to see more tomorrow, if you're available, Alexandra said. There are a few other properties I'd like to visit. Noah knew he should decline. He had already neglected his farm for one day. But the thought of spending more time with Alexandra was too tempting to resist. I'll pick you up at 8, he said. Alexandra smiled, a brief but brilliant expression that Noah carried with him all the way home. The next 2 days followed a similar pattern. Noah would pick Alexandra up in the morning, and they would spend the day visiting properties, talking about the area, and gradually sharing more about themselves. Noah found himself opening up about his hopes for the farm, his fears about losing it, his dreams of modernizing it if he ever had the capital to do so. Alexandra spoke less about her own life, but Noah gathered that she worked for a large automotive company in some executive capacity, that she had traveled extensively for work, and that she felt a strong sense of responsibility to use her position to make a positive impact. On the third evening, as they sat at a picnic table outside the local ice cream stand with cones rapidly melting in the warm evening air, Alexandra's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and sighed. I need to take this, she said apologetically. Work? Noah nodded, watching as she walked a short distance away to take the call. Her posture changed as she spoke, straightening, becoming more formal. Her free hand gestured emphatically, and though he couldn't hear her words, her expression shifted from annoyance to resignation. When she returned, her face was composed, but Noah could sense a tension that hadn't been there before. Everything okay? He asked. Alexandra sat back down, her ice cream forgotten. My car's been fixed, she said, and I'm being called back to the office. There's a situation that requires my attention. Oh. Noah tried to hide his disappointment. When do you need to leave? Tomorrow morning. Alexandra looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Noah, there's something I need to tell you. About who I am. Noah felt a chill despite the warm evening. Okay. Alexandra took a deep breath. My full name is Alexandra Blackwell Reeves. My grandfather was William Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Motors. My mother is Catherine Blackwell, the current CEO. I'm the company's Chief Innovation Officer. Noah stared at her, the information slowly penetrating. Blackwell Motors was one of the largest automotive manufacturers in the country, a brand synonymous with luxury vehicles and cutting-edge technology. And Alexandra wasn't just an employee, she was family, royalty, in the automotive world. He started, then stopped, unsure what to say. I'm sorry I wasn't completely forthright, Alexandra said quickly. It wasn't about deceiving you. It's just that when people know who I am, they treat me differently. And she hesitated. I wanted to see this place, talk to you, without that getting in the way. Noah nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. Her interest in his truck, her technical questions about mechanical systems, the way she'd studied the struggling farms with such intensity. So this wasn't really about looking at properties, he said flatly. Alexandra looked pained. It was, but not in the way I implied. I'm working on a new line of vehicles, practical, durable, designed for rural areas and working environments. Vehicles that can be maintained and repaired by their owners, that are built to last decades, not just until the warranty expires. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. I came here to understand the needs of the people who would use these vehicles, to see how they live, what challenges they face. And I was what? Your research subject? Noah stood up, the hurt and embarrassment overwhelming the logical part of his brain that said her explanation made sense. No, Noah. Alexandra stood too, her eyes pleading. It started as research, yes. But these days, with you they've meant more to me than that. Much more. Noah wanted to believe her. But the revelation that she was heir to an auto fortune, that she could buy his entire farm with what was probably pocket change to her, created a gulf between them that seemed unbridgeable. I should get you back to your hotel, he said stiffly. You probably have packing to do. The drive back to the Maplewood Inn was silent, the easy camaraderie of the past days evaporated. When Noah pulled up in front of the hotel, Alexandra turned to him. Noah, please, she said, her voice soft but urgent. Don't let this change everything. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, hands tight on the steering wheel. How can it not? You're Alexandra Blackwell Reeves. Your family probably has more money than everyone in this county combined. You came here under false pretenses to study us like we're some kind of research project. That's not fair, Alexandra protested. Yes, I came here for research, but I was honest about that. And everything else, our conversations, the time we spent together, that was real. She reached out hesitantly, then let her hand fall before touching his arm. I haven't felt this connected to someone in a very long time. Noah finally turned to look at her, the hurt in his eyes giving way to something more complex. You could have told me who you were from the beginning. Would you have treated me the same if I had? When Noah didn't answer, she continued. People see the name, the money, the company, but they don't see me. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing just Alexandra, not a Blackwell. The sincerity in her voice made Noah's resolve waver. Part of him understood her reasoning, but another part still felt betrayed. I'll be gone tomorrow, Alexandra said when he remained silent. But I'd like to see you one more time before I leave. Breakfast? 7 o'clock? Noah hesitated, then nodded curtly. 7. Alexandra gathered her bag, then paused with her hand on the door handle. For what it's worth, your truck is one of the most impressive vehicles I've seen in years. Not because of how it looks, or how fast it goes, but because of what it represents: durability, loyalty, a connection to something real. That's what I want to bring back to Blackwell Motors. That's what I've been missing. Before Noah could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the hotel entrance. The drive home was a blur. Noah's mind replaying every moment of the past 3 days, now colored by the knowledge of who Alexandra really was. The heiress to an auto fortune, slumming it in his beat-up truck, sleeping in a modest country inn, eating meatloaf at a roadside diner. Why? He parked in front of his farmhouse, but didn't get out immediately. Instead, he ran his hands over the cracked dashboard of his old Ford, thinking about what Alexandra had said, about it representing something real. Could she have been genuine about that? About her interest in creating vehicles that lasted, that could be repaired by their owners? Noah thought about the careful way she'd examined his irrigation system, asking technical questions that showed real understanding. He remembered her genuine interest in the stories of local farmers, the notes she'd taken Guran, the thoughtful questions she'd asked. That hadn't seemed like someone just going through the motions. And then there were the moments that had nothing to do with research, laughing together over ice cream, sharing stories about their childhoods, the way her eyes had lit up when he'd shown her the sunset from his favorite ridge overlooking the farm. By the time he finally went inside, Noah had decided to hear her out tomorrow. One last conversation couldn't hurt, and despite everything, he wasn't ready to say goodbye. The next morning dawned clear, and unusually cool. A hint of fall in the air, despite the summer date on the calendar. Noah dressed with more care than usual. Choosing his newest jeans, and the blue button-down shirt his sister insisted brought out his eyes. He told himself it didn't matter what he wore, this was just breakfast. A civil goodbye. But he still checked his reflection in the mirror twice before leaving. He arrived at the diner at 6:55 to find Alexandra already waiting in a booth by the window. She'd dressed simply again. Jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back. If he hadn't known who she was, he would never have guessed her net worth probably had 8 or 9 zeros at the end. "You came?" she said, obvious relief in her voice, as he slid into the seat across from her. "I said I would." Noah picked up the menu, though he knew it by heart. "When do you have to leave?" "My car will be ready at 9. I have a flight from Cedar Rapids at noon." Alexandra watched him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Noah, I want to talk to you about something important. A proposal." Noah lowered his menu, instantly wary. "What kind of proposal?" Alexandra leaned forward, her eyes intense. "A partnership between Blackwell Motors and your farm." "My farm?" Noah repeated, certain he'd misheard. "What would a car company want with my farm?" "Not the farm itself," Alexandra clarified. "Your expertise, your experience." She took a deep breath. "I want to create a testing facility for our new line of rural utility vehicles. A place where we can develop and test vehicles in real-world conditions, with input from people who actually use them daily. People like you." Noah stared at her. "You want to build a testing facility in Riverdale? I've been looking at properties, as I told you. But what I really need is a partner, someone who understands rural life, who knows vehicles, who can provide honest feedback about what works and what doesn't." Alexandra's expression was earnest. "You've kept that truck running for 24 years. You know every inch of it, every quirk, every strength and weakness. That kind of knowledge is invaluable to us." Noah's mind raced. "So, what exactly are you proposing?" "A consulting contract, to start. You'd advise our development team, test prototypes, provide feedback. We'd compensate you, of course." Alexandra hesitated. "Significantly." "How significantly?" Noah asked, curiosity overcoming his pride. Alexandra named a figure that made Noah's coffee cup freeze halfway to his mouth. It was more than he made in 2 years of farming. "That's substantial," he managed to say after he'd recovered. "It's fair," Alexandra countered. "Your expertise is worth it." She paused, then added more softly, "And there's something else. Something not on the official proposal." Noah raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I'd like to come back," Alexandra said, "regularly, to oversee the project personally." The implication hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about business. Before Noah could respond, Doris appeared to take their orders. They both asked for the breakfast special without really looking at the menu, eager to continue their conversation. When Doris had gone, Noah leaned back in the booth, studying Alexandra's face. "Why me? There must be thousands of farmers you could partner with, ones with newer equipment, more successful operations, locations closer to your headquarters." Alexandra's answer was immediate. "Because you see vehicles the way I want our customers to see the MAS tools, yes, but also as companions. Partners in your work and life. That truck isn't just transportation to you. It's a connection to your father, a piece of your history, something you value enough to maintain year after year." She leaned forward. "And because I trust you to be honest, to tell me when something won't work, when we're designing for boardroom approval instead of real-world functionality." Noah considered her words. The proposal was tempting not just financially, though the money would solve his immediate problems with the irrigation system and then some. But the idea of contributing to something meaningful, of helping create vehicles that could make a difference for people like him, that was even more appealing. And then there was Alexandra herself. The connection he felt with her hadn't disappeared with the revelation of her true identity. If anything, knowing she had chosen to spend time with him, to talk to him, when she could have been anywhere else in the world, made those moments seem more significant. "I'd need to think about it," Noah said finally. "This is a lot to process." Alexandra nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." She reached into her bag and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table to him. "My direct number. Not the office line, not my assistant. Me." Noah picked up the card. It was simple, elegant. Alexandra B. Reeves, Chief Innovation Officer, Blackwell Motors, with a phone number and email address. "I'll consider it," he said, tucking the card carefully into his shirt pocket. Their breakfast arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But underlying every word was the awareness that this might be goodbye. That in a few hours, Alexandra would be gone, and life would return to normal. Except Noah wasn't sure what normal would look like now, after these days with her had changed his perspective so fundamentally. All too soon, it was time to leave. Noah insisted on driving Alexandra to Mike's garage to pick up her car, extracting a few more precious minutes in her company. Mike raised his eyebrows when they entered together but limited his comments to an explanation of the repairs he'd made to the Mercedes. "Good as new," he declared, handing Alexandra the keys. "Though it's a shame a fancy car like this doesn't have a more reliable alternator. That's something we're working on improving." Alexandra replied with a smile, exchanging a private glance with Noah. Outside the garage, they stood awkwardly next to her gleaming black Mercedes, now a stark contrast to Noah's dusty blue Ford parked nearby. "So," Noah said, hands in his pockets. "So," Alexandra echoed, keys clutched in her hand. "Thank you. For everything. The ride when I was stranded. Showing me around. All of it." Noah nodded. "It was unexpected. But I'm glad I stopped." Alexandra took a step forward, then hesitated. "Will you think about the proposal?" "Seriously?" "I will," Noah promised. She studied his face for a moment, then reached up to touch his cheek lightly. "Goodbye, Noah Harrington." Before he could respond, she had turned and was sliding into the driver's seat of her Mercedes. Noah watched as she started the engine, gave him one last wave, and drove away, the sleek vehicle quickly disappearing down the road toward the highway. The town seemed strangely quiet after she left, as if she had taken some vital energy with her. Noah went through the motions of his day, stopping at the feed store, checking on a fence that needed repair, meeting with a seed supplier about next season's order. But his thoughts kept returning to Alexandra and her proposal. That evening, he sat on his porch with the business card in his hand, turning it over and over as he considered his options. The consulting fee alone would solve his immediate financial problems. But was this really just about money? If he said yes, he'd be entering Alexandra's world of corporate decisions, product development, deadlines and deliverables. A world very different from the rhythms of farm life that had shaped his existence for 34 years. And what about Alexandra herself? The connection between them had been real. He was sure of that now. But they came from such different backgrounds, lived such different lives. Even if she returned regularly for this project, would they find a way to bridge those differences? Noah was still pondering these questions 3 days later when his truck broke down 2 miles from home. A hose had finally given out after years of patching, leaving him stranded on a back road with a rapidly overheating engine. He called the only mechanic he trusted with his beloved Ford himself. His neighbor Frank agreed to pick him up and take him home to get his tools and the replacement hose he kept for just such an emergency. As Noah worked under the hood in the fading evening light, sweat dripping down his face despite the cooling air, he thought about Alexandra saying his truck represented something real. At that moment, with grease under his fingernails and the familiar smell of hot metal and engine oil in his nostrils, he understood exactly what she'd meant. This truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was a history written in maintenance records and replaced parts, in road trips and workdays, in moments both mundane and significant. Every dent and scratch told a story. Every repair represented a choice to preserve rather than replace. Would the vehicles Alexandra wanted to create have that same potential? Could a modern car company really build something meant to last decades, to be repaired rather than discarded when the next model came out? Noah finished the repair, wiping his hands on a rag as the engine idled smoothly once more. He made his decision standing there beside his faithful old truck on a quiet country road as the first stars appeared overhead. The next morning, he called the number on Alexandra's card. She answered on the second ring. "Alexandra Reeves." "It's Noah," he said, suddenly nervous. "Noah Harrington." There was a pause. Then her voice warmed. "Noah, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about your proposal," he said, pacing the length of his kitchen as he spoke. "About the partnership. And?" The hope in her voice was unmistakable. "I'm interested, but I have some conditions." Alexandra didn't hesitate. "Name them." "First, I want to be involved in the actual design process, not just testing. If these vehicles are supposed to work for people like me, I should have input from the ground up." "Absolutely. AUHAE. Absolutely." Alexandra agreed immediately. "That's exactly what I want too." "Second," Noah continued, gaining confidence, "I want to stay here, on my farm. I can travel when needed for meetings or testing, but this is where I live, where I work. We can make that work," Alexandra said. "Most of the testing would happen there anyway, and we can set up video conferences for design meetings." "And third," Noah paused, gathering his courage, "I want to know if this is just business for you, or if there's something more." The silence that followed was so long that Noah wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Then Alexandra spoke, her voice softer than before. "It started as business," she admitted. "But somewhere along the way, those days with you, Noah, they were the most real days I'd had in years. So yes, there's something more. At least, I hope there could be." Relief washed through Noah. "Good," he said simply. "Because I feel the same way. I'm coming back next week," Alexandra told him, the smile evident in her voice. "To look at the Wilson property again. We're considering it for the testing facility." "The irrigation system," Noah said suddenly. "On the Wilson place. It's newer than mine, but it has design flaws. They've had issues with the north field getting flooded while the south field stays too dry." Alexandra laughed. "See? That's exactly why I need you. No corporate survey would have told us that." They talked for another hour, their conversation ranging from practical details about the partnership to more personal topics, Alexandra's childhood dream of designing cars that would change the world, Noah's hopes for keeping his family farm viable for another generation. By the time they hung up, plans had been made for Alexandra's visit the following week, and Noah felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The future that had seemed so bleak just days ago now held possibilities he'd never imagined. The week passed in a blur of activity as Noah divided his time between farm work and preparation for Alexandra's return. He fixed the broken porch step, touched up the peeling paint on the farmhouse, and even cleared out the old office his father had used, thinking it might serve as a workspace for their project. When Alexandra's Mercedes appeared on his driveway, exactly 1 week after their phone call, Noah was waiting on the porch, his heart doing a silly little jump at the sight of her stepping out of the car. She looked different, somehow still polished and put together, but more relaxed than he'd seen her before. She wore jeans and boots similar to those she'd worn during her previous visit, but there was a confidence in her stride that hadn't been there before, as if she no longer needed to pretend to be someone else. "Welcome back," Noah said, coming down the steps to meet her. Alexandra smiled, the genuine expression transforming her face. "It's good to be back." They stood for a moment, both suddenly shy despite the hours they'd spent talking on the phone throughout the week. Then, Alexandra stepped forward and hugged him, a quick, impulsive gesture that Noah returned before he could overthink it. "I brought something for you," she said as they separated. "Well, for us, really. For the project." She opened the trunk of her car and removed a sleek laptop and a folder of documents. "The initial concept designs for the Heartland series," she explained as Noah took them from her. "I want your honest opinion." They spent the morning at Noah's kitchen table, poring over the designs. Alexandra explained the technical specifications, while Noah pointed out features that would or wouldn't work for real-world farm use. Their heads bent close together over the drawings, their hands occasionally brushing as they turned pages or pointed out details. "This storage compartment," Noah said, indicating a section of the design. "It's a good idea, but it needs to be accessible from outside the vehicle too. Sometimes you need to grab tools quickly without climbing in and out." Alexandra made a note. Good point. And what about the bed size? Is it adequate for your typical loads? For most things, yes. But you might consider an optional extended bed for those who regularly haul larger equipment. The conversation flowed easily, their different areas of expertise complementing each other. Alexandra knew materials, engineering, production costs. Noah knew practicality, durability, the real needs of people who use trucks as daily work tools. After lunch sandwiches eaten on the porch, as they watched storm clouds gathering on the horizon, they drove out to look at the Wilson property again. The elderly couple who owned it were delighted to show them around, clearly pleased at the prospect of their land being used for something innovative, rather than simply absorbed into a corporate farming operation. "You two make a good team," Mrs. Wilson commented as they walked back to Noah's truck after the tour. "Reminds me of how Harold and I used to be different strengths, but working toward the same goal." Noah and Alexandra exchanged glances, but didn't correct the assumption that they were a couple. Something was growing between them, something neither was ready to label yet, but both could feel. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon finally broke as they drove back to Noah's farm. Rain lashed against the windshield, and thunder rumbled overhead. "Should we wait it out?" Alexandra asked, as Noah parked in front of his house. The rain was coming down in sheets now, visibility reduced to just a few feet. "Probably smart," Noah agreed. "These summer storms can be intense, but they usually pass quickly." They dashed from the truck to the porch, arriving breathless and laughing, despite being soaked in the short distance. Noah led Alexandra inside and found towels for both of them. "I should have checked the forecast," he said, running a towel over his damp hair. "Sorry about this." "Don't be," Alexandra said, her eyes bright with an emotion Noah couldn't quite name. "I love storms. The raw power of them, the way they change everything they touch. In the city, they're just inconveniences. Out here, they feel elemental." Noah smiled, recognizing the sentiment. "My dad used to say storms remind us that we're not really in control, no matter how much we think we are." "Your dad was a wise man," Alexandra said softly. They stood in Noah's kitchen, the air between them charged in a way that had nothing to do with the lightning flashing outside. Alexandra's hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly around her face. A drop of water traced a path down her neck, disappearing beneath the collar of her shirt. Noah looked away, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment felt. "Coffee?" he offered, eating something to do with his hands. "Or I might have some hot chocolate somewhere." "Hot chocolate sounds perfect," Alexandra said, her voice a touch huskier than normal. As Noah busied himself with heating milk and finding the cocoa mix, Alexandra wandered into the living room. When he joined her with 2 steaming mugs, she was looking at the photographs on the mantel again, not just the one of Noah and his father with the truck, but others showing generations of Harringtons on this land. "Your family," she said, accepting the mug he offered. "They built something that lasted." "They did," Noah agreed, standing beside her. "Not always easy, not always perfect, but lasting. That's what I want for the Heartland series," Alexandra said, turning to face him. "Vehicles that become part of people's stories, that serve generations. Not disposable, not just status symbols, but tools that help build lives and legacies." The passion in her voice moved Noah. This wasn't corporate talk or marketing spin. This was genuine belief in what she was creating. "I think we can do that," he said, the "we" feeling natural and right. Alexandra's smile was soft, intimate. "I think so too." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but neither of them noticed, too absorbed in conversation about designs and dreams, possibilities and plans. Hours passed, the rain eventually tapering off to a gentle patter against the windows. It was nearly midnight when Alexandra finally glanced at her watch. "I should get back to the hotel," she said reluctantly. Noah nodded, though part of him wanted to ask her to stay, not for any inappropriate reason, but simply because he wasn't ready for this evening to end. "I'll drive you." "My car's here," Alexandra reminded him. "Right," Noah said, feeling foolish. "Of course." They walked to the door together, the moment of parting suddenly awkward. Alexandra turned to face him, her expression serious. "Noah, I want you to know something. This partnership, it's important to me professionally, yes. But what's happening between us?" She hesitated. "That's important to me too. And I don't want one to complicate the other." Noah understood her concern. If their personal relationship didn't work out, would it jeopardize the professional one? If the professional partnership failed, would it poison what was growing between them personally? "We'll figure it out," he said, reaching for her hand. "One day at a time." Alexandra's fingers interlaced with his, warm and strong. "One day at a time," she agreed. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning a beginning rather than a culmination. When they pulled apart, Alexandra's eyes were bright, her smile both shy and certain. "I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked. Noah nodded. "Tomorrow." He watched as she drove away, her taillights disappearing down his long driveway. Only then did he allow himself to consider the enormity of what was happening, not just the partnership that could save his farm, but the relationship that could change his life. For the first time in years, Noah fell asleep, thinking about possibilities rather than problems. The next 6 months transformed Noah's life in ways he could never have imagined. The partnership with Blackwell Motors became official, with contracts signed and plans developed for the testing facility on the former Wilson property. Noah found himself splitting his time between farming and consulting, his practical expertise proving invaluable as the design team refined the Heartland series prototypes. Alexandra came to Riverdale at least twice a month, staying for 3 or 4 days each visit. At first, she kept her room at the Maplewood Inn, but as their relationship deepened, she began staying at Noah's farmhouse. They kept things professional during working hours, but evenings and early mornings were their own time to explore their growing feelings, to learn each other's habits and histories, to build something that was becoming as solid and real as the vehicles they were creating together. On a crisp October day, the first prototype of the Heartland series pickup arrived in Riverdale. A team of engineers accompanied it, eager to begin real-world testing under Noah's supervision. The vehicle, officially designated HS1, but affectionately nicknamed Hope by the design team, was a marvel of practical engineering. Its frame was steel, its body panels designed for easy removal and replacement if damaged. The engine compartment was spacious and logically arranged, making routine maintenance accessible to owners without specialized tools or training. "What do you think?" Alexandra asked as Noah circled the vehicle, examining every detail with a critical eye. "It's a good start," he said, his tone measured but his eyes bright with excitement. "Let's see how it performs." Over the next week, Noah put the prototype through its paces, hauling loads, navigating rough terrain, performing the countless tasks a working farm truck needed to handle. The engineers followed, taking notes, making adjustments, learning as much from what Noah didn't say as from his explicit feedback. "The suspension's too stiff for these back roads," Noah commented after one particularly bumpy test drive. "And the seat doesn't provide enough lower back support for long days." The chief engineer nodded, making notes. "We can adjust that. What about the cargo capacity? Is it sufficient?" "For most needs, yes. But I'm thinking about harvest time, when farmers might be hauling heavier loads. You might want to consider reinforced springs as an option for those who regularly push the capacity limits." Alexandra watched these exchanges with quiet pride. This was exactly what she'd hoped for: practical, specific feedback from someone who understood the daily realities of rural work. By the time the engineering team departed, leaving the prototype behind for Noah to continue testing, the vehicle had already undergone dozens of small improvements. More would come as Noah integrated it into his daily farm operations and documented its performance. "It's really happening," Alexandra said that evening as they sat on Noah's porch, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of orange and gold. "The Heartland series is becoming real." "It is," Noah agreed, his arm around her shoulders. "And it's going to be something special. Because of you," Alexandra said, leaning into him. "Your vision, your expertise." "Our vision," Noah corrected gently. "This is as much yours as mine. More, really." You're the one who convinced a major auto manufacturer to build vehicles that are designed to be kept rather than replaced. Alexandra smiled, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. The board meeting is next week. They'll want to see early results, metrics, projections. And you'll show them, Noah said confidently. The initial tests are exceeding expectations. The focus groups love the concept. The production costs are higher than standard models, yes, but the projected customer loyalty and reduced warranty claims balance that out. Alexandra looked at him in surprise. You've been studying the reports. Of course I have, Noah said. This isn't just your project anymore. It's ours. The kiss she gave him was slow and sweet, full of gratitude and something deeper, something that had been growing between them through months of shared work and shared dreams. I have to go back tomorrow, Alexandra said when they finally pulled apart. The board meeting, preparation with the financial team, all of it. I know, Noah said, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. When will you be back? Alexandra hesitated. That depends on how the meeting goes. If they approve the expanded budget for the Heartland series, I'll need to stay in Detroit for a while, overseeing the next phase. It could be a few weeks before I can get back here. Noah nodded, hiding his disappointment. He'd grown accustomed to her regular visits, to having her in his home, in his life. I understand. This is a critical time for the project. It is, Alexandra agreed. But also, she took a deep breath. Noah, I've been thinking. This constant back and forth between Riverdale and Detroit, it's becoming exhausting, and as the project ramps up, I'll need to be more present at headquarters. Noah felt his chest tighten. Was this the beginning of the end? Had the reality of their different worlds finally caught up with them? I understand, he said again, his voice carefully neutral. You have responsibilities there. I do, Alexandra said. But I also have feelings for you, strong ones. She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. Noah, would you consider coming to Detroit with me? Not permanently, but for a few months. You could work directly with the design team, see the manufacturing process, be part of the project in a way that's not planned. Possible from here. Relief washed through Noah, followed quickly by uncertainty. Leave the farm? For months? Just for the winter, Alexandra clarified. The slowest season for you anyway. We could find someone to look after things here, check on the house, feed the cattle. And you'd be back well before spring planting. Noah considered it. The idea of leaving his farm, even temporarily, made him uneasy. This land had been his whole life, his anchor. But Alexandra was offering him a chance to be part of something bigger, to see the project they'd created together come to fruition. And more than that, she was offering a chance for them to see if what they had could work in her world, not just in his. I'll think about it, he promised. Seriously. Alexandra nodded, understanding the magnitude of what she was asking. That's all I can ask. The next morning, as Noah stood in his driveway watching Alexandra's Mercedes disappear down the road, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride in what they were creating together. Worry about the board's decision. And something else. Something that felt remarkably like love, though neither of them had used that word yet. The week that followed was one of the longest of Noah's life. He threw himself into farm work during the day and spent evenings testing the prototype truck, meticulously documenting its performance. Alexandra called daily, updating him on preparations for the board meeting, but their conversations were brief, both of them too preoccupied for the deeper talks they'd grown accustomed to. On the day of the board meeting, Noah found himself unable to focus on anything. He checked his phone constantly, waiting for news. When it finally came, it was in the form of a video call, rather than a regular phone call. Alexandra's face filled his screen, her expression controlled, but her eyes dancing with excitement. They approved it, she said without preamble. Full funding for the Heartland series, with a projected launch date of 18 months from now. Alexandra, that's amazing. Noah's grin matched her barely contained excitement. I knew you could convince them. It was your data that did it, she replied. The test results, the focus group feedback, it all supported what we've been saying from the beginning. There's a market for vehicles built to last, designed to be repaired rather than replaced. She paused, her expression growing more serious. There's more, Noah. The board was so impressed with the concept that they want to expand it. Not just pickups, but SUVs, compact trucks, even agricultural equipment eventually. They're calling it the Blackwell Legacy Line, now vehicles designed to become family heirlooms, passed down through generations. End quote. Noah felt a surge of pride. This was so much bigger than he'd ever imagined when he'd stopped to help a stranded motorist that summer day. The Legacy Line, he repeated. I like that name. So do I, Alexandra agreed. It captures exactly what we're trying to do. She hesitated, then added, Have you thought any more about coming to Detroit? The team would benefit enormously from having you here as we move into this expanded development phase. Noah had thought of little else all week. I have, he said slowly. And I've made some calls. My neighbor Frank is willing to look after things here. Check on the cattle daily, keep an eye on the house. And since it's winter, there's not much farm work to be done anyway. Alexandra's expression brightened. Does that mean? Yes, Noah said, his decision feeling right as he spoke it aloud. I'll come to Detroit. For the winter. To help with the Legacy Line. The smile that bloomed across Alexandra's face was worth any doubts he might have harbored. When can you come? Next week? Noah suggested. I need a few days to get things arranged here. Prepare Frank for what I'll need to do. Next week is perfect, Alexandra said. I'll have everything ready for you. An office at headquarters, an apartment. An apartment? Noah interrupted. I thought. He stopped, suddenly uncertain. Alexandra's expression softened. I thought you might stay with me, she said quietly. If you want to. My place is big enough for two, and it would give us more time together outside of work. But if you prefer your own space, I completely understand. No, Noah said quickly. I'd like to stay with you. I just wasn't sure if that's what you wanted. It is, Alexandra assured him. Very much. They talked for another hour, making plans and sharing hopes for this new phase of their partnership, both professional and personal. When they finally hung up, Noah stood in his kitchen, looking around at the home that had been his entire world for so long. The prospect of leaving it was still daunting, but now mixed with an excitement he hadn't anticipated. The next week passed in a flurry of preparation. Noah arranged for Frank to take care of the farm, organized his notes on the prototype testing, and packed for a winter in the city, including clothes for occasions more formal than he'd ever needed in Riverdale. On his last evening before departure, Noah took the prototype truck for one final drive around his property. As he parked it back in front of the farmhouse, he noticed how right it looked there. A vehicle designed to serve, to last, to become part of someone's story, rather than just a temporary possession. That was what Alexandra had seen from the beginning, he realized. Not just a marketing opportunity or a product niche, but a different relationship between people and the things they owned. A return to valuing durability and function over flash and novelty. The next morning, Noah locked up his farmhouse, handed the spare key to Frank, and climbed into his old blue Ford for the drive to the airport. The irony wasn't lost on him leaving his beloved farm truck behind to fly to the headquarters of one of the world's largest automobile manufacturers, all because that truck had broken down on the side of the road. Months earlier, Alexandra was waiting at the arrivals gate in Detroit, a sight so incongruous with his memories of her in Riverdale that Noah almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the casual clothes and simple ponytail. This Alexandra wore a tailored suit, her hair styled elegantly, her presence commanding enough that people unconsciously moved out of her way as she walked. But her smile when she spotted him was the same, and when she wrapped her arms around him in a hug that defied professional boundaries, Noah knew that, underneath the corporate exterior, was still the woman who had sat on his porch watching thunderstorms and drinking hot chocolate. "Welcome to Detroit," she said when they finally pulled apart. "How was your flight?" "Fine," Noah said, still taking in the bustling airport around them. "Different. I haven't flown since my sister's wedding 3 years ago." Alexandra smiled, taking his hand as naturally as if they'd been doing it for years. "Well, you're here now. Let's get your bags and head home." Home. The word resonated strangely in Noah's mind as they collected his suitcase and walked to the short-term parking garage. This wasn't his home. His home was 500 acres of soil and history, a weathered farmhouse, and open skies. But Alexandra's use of the word felt right somehow, as if home might be more about people than places. The car waiting in the parking garage wasn't the Mercedes Noah remembered. Instead, it was a prototype Blackwell SUV, sleek but not ostentatious, clearly designed with function in mind. "Another test vehicle?" Noah asked, as Alexandra opened the trunk for his luggage. "The first of the Legacy Line SUVs," she confirmed. "I thought you might want to see how it performs in urban conditions." Noah ran an appreciative hand over the vehicle's clean lines. "Looks good. Solid. Wait until you drive it," Alexandra said with a grin. "But that's for tomorrow. Today, let's just get you settled." The drive from the airport to Alexandra's condominium took them through the heart of Detroit. Noah watched out the window, taking in the contrast between the gleaming downtown towers and the more weathered neighborhoods they passed. Alexandra pointed out landmarks: the Blackwell Motors headquarters, a towering glass structure near the riverfront, the original factory where her grandfather had started the company, now converted into a museum, the research campus where the Legacy Line was being developed. "It's a city with history," she said as they drove. "Like your farm. Generations of stories built into the foundations." Noah nodded, appreciating her attempt to find common ground between his world and hers. "Different kinds of stories, but I see what you mean." Alexandra's condominium was in a renovated historic building downtown, 12 stories up with views of the river and the Canadian shore beyond. The space was open and airy, with high ceilings, large windows, and a blend of modern and antique furnishings that somehow managed to feel both sophisticated and comfortable. "This is, Noah searched for the right word as he set his suitcase down. "Not what I expected." Alexandra raised an eyebrow, amused. "What did you expect? Marble floors and gold fixtures?" Noah chuckled, acknowledging the stereotype he'd unconsciously harbored. "Something like that, maybe. This is beautiful, but it feels like a home, not a showcase." "That's exactly what I wanted," Alexandra said, pleased by his observation. "I spend too much time in sleek, impersonal spaces at work. I need somewhere that feels real when I come home." She led him through the space, showing him the guest room that had been converted into a home office they could share, the kitchen where she admitted she rarely cooked, the living room with its wall of books on subjects ranging from automotive engineering to poetry. "And this is our room," she said, a hint of shyness in her voice as she opened the door to the master bedroom. "If you're comfortable with that. If not, the guest room is—" "This is perfect," Noah interrupted gently, setting his suitcase near the closet she'd cleared for his things. The room, like the rest of the condominium, was elegant but welcoming. A king-sized bed with simple linens, windows overlooking the city, photographs on the walls that Noah recognized as Alexandra's work from her visits to Riverdale. "You've been planning this for a while," he observed, noting the space she'd made for him throughout the apartment. Alexandra nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Since the day you agreed to come. I wanted you to feel welcome." "I do," Noah assured her, pulling her into his arms. "More than welcome." Their kiss was familiar now, but no less thrilling for Ita, reaffirmation of what had grown between them over the months, a promise of what might yet develop. They spent the evening quietly, both aware that tomorrow would bring Noah's introduction to the Blackwell Motors team and the beginning of this new phase of their partnership. Alexandra ordered dinner from a local restaurant. "The kitchen is functional, I promise, but after your travel day, this seemed easier." And they ate on the balcony despite the December chill, the city lights spreading before them like earthbound stars. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Alexandra asked as they lingered over the remains of the meal. Noah considered the question honestly. "A little," he admitted. "It's a long way from my farm to a corporate headquarters." "You'll be fine," Alexandra assured him. "They're excited to meet you. Your input has already shaped so much of the Legacy Line, even from a distance." "Still," Noah said, gazing out at the unfamiliar cityscape, It's your world, not mine. What if I don't fit in? Alexandra took his hand across the table. That's exactly why you're valuable, Noah. You bring a perspective they don't have. The legacy line isn't for corporate executives who replace their vehicles every 2 years based on the latest trends. It's for people who see vehicles as tools, as investments, as parts of their lives. She squeezed his fingers gently. Just be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted. Noah nodded, drawing strength from her confidence in him. I'll try. That night, as they lay in the unfamiliar darkness of Alexandra's bedroom, now Noah found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him here. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling farmer with mounting debts and dwindling hope. Now he was partnered with one of the largest automobile manufacturers in the country, helping to design vehicles that could change how people thought about transportation. And more importantly, he'd found Alexandra, a woman he would never have met if her car hadn't broken down on that particular stretch of road on that particular summer day. What are you thinking about? Alexandra murmured, her head nestled against his shoulder. Fate, Noah replied honestly. Coincidence. The strange paths that lead us to exactly where we need to be. Alexandra shifted to look at him, her expression thoughtful in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Do you think it was fate that brought us together? I don't know, Noah said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. But I'm grateful, whatever it was. Alexandra smiled, settling back against him. So am I. The next morning, Noah dressed with unusual care in the clothes he'd brought for his Detroit State Arc jeans. A button-down shirt, a sports jacket that felt constraining after years of t-shirts and work clothes. Alexandra, already dressed in a tailored suit, helped him with his tie, her fingers deft against his collar. You look handsome, she said, stepping back to survey her work. Professional, but authentic. Perfect. Noah tugged at the unfamiliar constriction around his neck. If you say so. I do, Alexandra said firmly. Now, are you ready to see the future of Blackwell Motors? The headquarters building was even more impressive up close than it had appeared from the car the day before. 60 stories of glass and steel reflecting the winter sunlight. The Blackwell Motors logo displayed prominently near the top. As they walked through the soaring lobby, people nodded respectfully to Alexandra, some offering curious glances at Noah before returning to their hurried pace. Alexandra led into a private elevator that whisked them to the executive floor. Executive seemed inadequate to describe the space they entered. Walls of windows offering panoramic views of the city. Reception areas with furniture that probably cost more than Noah's tractor. Art pieces displayed by like treasures in a museum. Ms. Reeves, a young man greeted them as they stepped off the elevator. The team is assembled in conference room A. They're eager to meet Mr. Harrington. Thank you, James, Alexandra replied, and Noah realized this must be the assistant she'd mentioned in their phone calls. Noah, this is James Chen, without whom I'd probably miss half my meetings and forget to eat. Most days. James smiled, extending his hand to Noah. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Harrington. I've heard so much about you. Just Noah, please, Noah said, shaking the offered hand. And likewise. James led them through the executive floor to a large conference room where about 20 people were gathered around a massive table. Conversation stopped as Alexandra entered, all eyes turning to her and then to Noah. Good morning, everyone, Alexandra said, her voice taking on an authority Noah had glimpsed only occasionally during their time in Riverdale. I'd like to introduce Noah Harrington, our primary consultant on the legacy line and the person whose expertise has shaped much of what we're doing. Noah, this is the core team for the project. Noah nodded to the assembled group, feeling oddly like an exhibit at a museum rather than a participant in a meeting. But as Alexandra began introductions, engineers, designers, marketing specialists, production experts, he found himself drawn into conversations about vehicle specifications, material durability, practical applications. These were topics he understood, areas where his experience gave him valuable insights, and gradually his initial discomfort faded. We've incorporated your feedback on the prototype pickup. The lead engineer, Dr. Kim, explained as she showed Noah the latest designs. The suspension has been recalibrated for better performance on rough terrain, and we've added the reinforced springs you suggested as an option for heavy loads. Noah examined the specifications with genuine interest. This looks good. What about the accessibility issue with the engine compartment? Have you been able to address that? Dr. Kim smiled, clearly pleased by the question. We have. Let me show you the revised layout. By the end of the meeting, Noah felt cautiously optimistic about his role in this project. These people might wear suits instead of work clothes, might drive luxury vehicles instead of 20-year-old trucks, but they respected expertise and valued practical knowledge. They listened when he spoke, and he found himself listening equally carefully to them, learning about manufacturing constraints and material science aspects he'd never considered. So, Alexandra said as they left the conference room hours later, "What do you think?" "They know their stuff," Noah acknowledged, "and they seem genuinely committed to the concept behind the legacy line." "They are," Alexandra assured him. "That's why I chose them for this team. They believe in building something that lasts, not just something that sells." The weeks that followed fell into a productive rhythm. Noah spent his days at Blackwell headquarters, working with various members of the legacy line team, providing input on designs, testing prototypes, and gradually helping to shape vehicles that combined modern technology with old-fashioned durability. Evenings and weekends belonged to him and Alexandra. She showed him her Detroit, not the tourist attractions, but the places that had meaning to her. The neighborhood where her grandfather had opened his first repair shop before founding Blackwell Motors. The small park, where she'd come as a child to escape the pressures of being a Blackwell. The local diner that served meatloaf almost as good as the one in Riverdale. In turn, Noah shared parts of himself he'd never expected to reveal, stories of his childhood on the farm, his brief rebellion in college, when he'd considered becoming an engineer rather than returning home, his dreams for what the farm could be if he ever had the capital to fully modernize it. As Christmas approached, Alexandra surprised Noah with a suggestion. "Let's go back to Riverdale for the holiday," she said one evening as they sat in their living room, working on separate aspects of the legacy line project. "You must miss the farm, and I'd love to see it in winter." Noah looked up from his laptop, touched by the offer. "Are you sure? I assumed you'd have family obligations here." Alexandra's expression flickered briefly. "My mother expects me at the annual Blackwell Christmas gala, yes. But that's on the 23rd. We could fly to Riverdale on the 24th, spend Christmas there, and come back for New Year's." "I'd like that," Noah said, realizing how much he missed his farm despite the satisfaction he'd found in his work in Detroit. "Frank says everything's fine, but it would be good to check on things myself." Alexandra smiled, setting aside her tablet to join him on the sofa. Then it settled. Christmas in Riverdale. On December 23rd, Noah found himself in a tuxedo rented, since he'd never had occasion to own one, at the Blackwell Motors annual gala. The event was held in the grand ballroom of Detroit's most prestigious hotel, attended by the company's executives, board members, major bass, shareholders, and various business and political figures. "Nervous?" Alexandra asked, as they stepped out of the car that had delivered them to the hotel entrance. She looked stunning in a deep green evening gown, her hair swept up elegantly, diamonds at her ears that Noah suspected were family heirlooms. "Terrified," Noah admitted. "I've never been to anything like this." Alexandra squeezed his hand. "Just remember, you're here with me because I want you here. You don't have to impress anyone." Noah nodded, drawing a deep breath as they entered the ballroom. The space was transformed into a winter wonderland, with ice sculptures, crystal decorations, and subtle lighting that made everything sparkle. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played classical music in one corner. "Alexandra!" a commanding female voice called as they made their way into the room. "There you are." A woman approached them, tall, elegant, with the same dark hair as Alexandra, though streaked with silver and cut in a severe bob. Noah recognized Catherine Blackwell immediately from photographs he'd seen Alexandra's mother and the CEO of Blackwell Motors. "Mother?" Alexandra greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. "Merry Christmas. I'd like you to meet Noah Harrington." "Noah, this is my mother, Catherine Blackwell." Catherine extended her hand, her assessment of Noah swift and thorough. "Mr. Harrington, I've heard a great deal about you from the Legacy Line team. Your input has been quite valuable, I understand. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwell, Noah said, finding his voice. It's an honor to meet you. Catherine, please, she corrected, though her tone remained formal. Tell me, how are you finding Detroit after your rural background? The slight pause wasn't lost on Noah, but he chose to ignore it. Different, but fascinating. Alexandra has been an excellent guide. Catherine's gaze shifted between them, noting their proximity, the comfortable way they stood together. I see. And the legacy line? Do you believe it has potential in markets like yours? I do, Noah said with more confidence. This was a topic where he felt on solid ground. There's a real need for vehicles that are built to last, that owners can maintain themselves. The legacy line addresses that need directly. Something that might have been approval flickered across Catherine's face. Interesting. I'd like to hear more about your perspective. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting after the holidays? Mother, Alexandra interrupted, a warning note in her voice. This is a party, not a board meeting. Catherine smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. Of course. Forgive me. Business is a difficult habit to break. She turned back to Noah. Enjoy the evening, Mr. Harrington. I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk in the future. As she moved away to greet other guests, Alexandra let out a small sigh. I'm sorry about that. My mother tends to see everyone as either a business opportunity or a business obstacle. It's fine, Noah assured her. She seems formidable. Alexandra laughed. That's one word for it. Come on, let me introduce you to some people who are less likely to interrogate you. The evening progressed more pleasantly than Noah had feared. Alexandra introduced him to colleagues and friends, most of whom were genuinely interested in his perspective on the legacy line and his experiences working with the design team. A few gave him the politely curious looks reserved for exotic specimens, but most treated him with respect. Near midnight, as the party began to wind down, Alexandra led Noah out onto a terrace overlooking the city. The December air was bitingly cold, but the terrace was heated, and they were alone for the first time in hours. You survived, Alexandra said, her smile visible in the soft outdoor lighting. Barely, Noah replied, though he was smiling too. Your world is intense. It can be, Alexandra agreed, moving closer to him, seeking warmth or connection, or both. But it's just one part of my life. Not the most important part. Noah wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her against him. What is the most important part? Alexandra looked up at him, her expression serious despite the champagne they both consumed and the festive atmosphere around them. The people I care about. The things I create that make a difference. The moments that feel real. She paused, then added softly, You. The word hung between them. Simple, but profound. Noah felt something shift in his chest, a certainty settling where doubt had lingered. I love you, he said, the words emerging with surprising ease. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I do. I love you, Alexandra. Alexandra's eyes widened, then softened. I love you too, she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. So much that it sometimes scares me. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, a promise exchanged under winter stars. When they finally pulled apart, Alexandra's eyes were bright with emotion. Let's go home, she said. To Riverdale. Tomorrow. Noah nodded, understanding that home now meant something different for both of them. Not just a place, but a feeling they found in each other's presence. The next day, Christmas Eve, they flew to the small regional airport near Riverdale and drove the rental car along familiar roads to Noah's farm. Snow had fallen while he'd been away, transforming the landscape into a winter tableau, fields and gray, blanketed in white. The farmhouse adorned with icicles, the old oak trees standing like sentinels against the gray sky. It's beautiful, Alexandra said as they pulled into the driveway. Like something from a holiday card. Noah felt a surge of pride mixed with the relief of homecoming. The farm might not be as grand as the Blackwell estate or as polished as Alexandra's urban condominium, but it was his, rooted in generations of his family's toil and dreams. Frank had kept the house warm, and had left a note welcoming them back, along with a pie his wife had baked for the holiday. Noah showed Alexandra around, seeing the familiar spaces through her eyes: the kitchen, where his mother had taught him to cook, the living room where his father had read by the fire on winter evenings, the study that still held agricultural journals dating back decades. They spent the afternoon settling in and preparing for Christmas. Alexandra had insisted on bringing gifts, despite Noah's protests that her presence was gift enough. They placed them under the small pine tree Noah had cut from the back section of his property and decorated with ornaments his family had collected over generations. That evening, as snow began to fall again, they sat before the fireplace with mugs of hot cider, watching the flames dance and talk about everything and nothing. The contrast with the previous night's gala couldn't have been more stark, yet Alexandra seemed equally at home here on his worn sofa as she had been in her elegant gown among Detroit's elite. "Are you glad we came?" she asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "Very," Noah said, his arm tightening around her. "It feels right, having you here. Especially today." They exchanged gifts on Christmas morning, practical items mostly, things that showed how well they'd come to know each other despite the relatively short time they'd been together. Noah gave Alexandra a handcrafted leather portfolio for her design sketches, embossed with her initials. She gave him a set of specialized tools he'd admired in a Detroit shop but had considered too expensive to justify. But it was Alexandra's second gift that left Noah speechless: a large envelope containing detailed plans for a modern irrigation system for his farm, along with confirmation that the installation was already scheduled for early spring, fully paid for. "Alexandra," he began, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gift. This is too much. I can't." "You can," she interrupted gently. "Noah, the work you've done with us on the legacy line has saved Blackwell Motors millions in potential warranty claims and redesign costs. This is a fraction of what your expertise is worth to the company." She took his hand. "Consider it a business investment if that makes it easier to accept. The consulting contract with the farm rather than with you personally." Noah shook his head, still stunned by the gift. "This will transform the farm. Double production in the South Fields alone. Reduce water usage overall." He looked up at her, emotion making his voice rough. "Thank you. I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say anything," Alexandra assured him. "Just accept it, the way you've accepted me into your life." Later that day, after a simple but satisfying Christmas dinner, they bundled up and went for a walk around the property. The snow had stopped, leaving a pristine blanket across the fields, and the late afternoon sun cast long blue shadows across the white landscape. "I have something to ask you," Alexandra said as they paused on a rise overlooking the farm. "Something I'd been thinking about for a while." Noah turned to her, noting the serious expression on her face. "What is it?" Alexandra took a deep breath, her exhalation visible in the cold air. "The legacy line is going to launch in a year. After that, the project will transition from development to production and marketing. My role will change, become less hands-on." Noah nodded, wondering where this was leading. "That makes sense. I've been thinking about what comes next," Alexandra continued. "For me, for us." She gestured at the land spread out before them. "Noah, what would you think about me moving here? Not all the time. I'd still need to be in Detroit regularly for board meetings and corporate functions, but making this our primary home instead of the condo." Noah stared at her, certain he'd misunderstood. "You want to move to Riverdale? But your work? Your life in Detroit?" "My work can be done remotely much of the time," Alexandra said. "And as for my life, I've been happier here, with you, than I've been anywhere else in years." She looked out over the snow-covered fields. "This place has something my world doesn't. A connection to what's real, what lasts. Like the legacy line vehicles we're building, this farm is meant to endure, to serve a purpose beyond the immediate or the trendy." Noah tried to process what she was suggesting. "You'd be giving up so much. Or gaining something more valuable," Alexandra countered. "Noah, these months with you have changed how I see everything: my work, my future, what matters most. I don't want to lose that perspective by going back to my old life full-time." "What about your mother? The company?" "The company?" Noah asked, still struggling to believe what he was hearing. Alexandra smiled wryly. My mother will survive. As for the company, Blackwell Motors existed before me and will continue after me. I'm not suggesting leaving my role, just redefining it, balancing it with other priorities. Wes. She took his hands, her expression earnest. With us. Us. The word encompassed so much: their professional partnership, their personal relationship, the future they might build together, that neither could have imagined 6 months ago. Are you sure? Noah asked, needing to be certain this wasn't some holiday-induced fantasy that would evaporate in the cold light of reality. I've never been more certain of anything, Alexandra said firmly. This feels right, Noah. Like coming home, even though I never lived here before. Noah looked at the woman before him, brilliant, accomplished, capable of living anywhere and doing anything, yet choosing his world, his life, him. In that moment, he knew with absolute clarity what he wanted. Alexandra Blackwell Reeves, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. If you're serious about making this your home, then I need to ask you something too. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, not velvet like the ones in jewelry stores, but worn leather that had held his grandmother's ring for decades. He'd retrieved it from his dresser drawer that morning, acting on an impulse that now seemed like the most natural thing in the world. I was going to wait, Noah said, until we'd had more time, until I was sure you wouldn't be giving up too much. But if you're ready to make this leap, then so am I. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond set in gold. Will you marry me? Alexandra's eyes widened, then filled with tears that sparkled in the winter sunlight. Yes, she whispered, and louder. Yes, Noah Harrington, I will marry you. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. As Noah slipped it onto her finger, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a broken-down car on a country road to a partnership that spanned worlds. From a simple act of kindness to a love that had transformed both their lives. It's not fancy, he said, nodding at the ring. Not what you're probably used to. It's perfect, Alexandra said firmly, admiring the way the diamond caught the light. It has history, character, like your truck, like this farm. She looked up at him, her smile radiant. Like our love. As they walked back to the farmhouse, hand in hand, snow beginning to fall again around them, Noah thought about the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together: a failed alternator, a chance encounter, a shared vision for vehicles that would last generations. Some might call it coincidence. Others might call it fate. Noah preferred to think of it as the universe recognizing when two halves of a whole were meant to find each other, no matter how improbable the circumstances. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling farmer offering his truck to a stranded stranger. Now, he was a partner in creating a revolutionary line of vehicles, and engaged to a woman who saw beyond his weathered clothes and calloused hands to the heart beneath. And Alexandra, who had arrived in Riverdale seeking authenticity for her company's products, had found it not just in the vehicles she hoped to create, but in the man who had shown her what it meant to build something meant to last, whether it was a truck, a farm, or a love that could bridge two different worlds. As they reached the farmhouse, its windows glowing warm and welcoming against the gathering dusk, Alexandra paused on the porch steps, her hand still in Noah's. Happy? He asked, already knowing the answer from the contentment in her eyes. More than I ever thought possible, she replied, her free hand touching the ring that symbolized their future together. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Noah nodded, drawing her close as snowflakes danced around them. The beginning of our legacy, he agreed. And as they stood there, farmer and heiress, unlikely partners, united by chance and choice and love, they both knew that what they were building together, a relationship, a future, a life, would be like the vehicles they were creating. Something real, something lasting, something that mattered. Something built to endure, not just for a season or a year, but for a lifetime.